Okay, so we're going to go over a little bit of rhetoric. This PowerPoint is going to be an overview, and it is not going to go into the application pieces that we're going to be doing later in the unit, but it should help you to be able to define and know where to put all of the things that we are going to be talking about during it. So we are going to be going over in this PowerPoint the terms you need to know. We're going to talk about a rhetorical diagram so you can see exactly how those terms fit together, and then we'll even go over an example to make sure everyone's clear. So rhetoric is basically the art of using words, either written or spoken, to persuade someone of something. So whenever I say rhetoric, we're just talking about being able to use words to persuade someone. Things you need to know. You're going to need to know who the speaker is. You're going to need to know what the context is. And by the way, exigence, that word right there, is just another word for context. You're going to need to know who the audience is. There could be multiple audiences. You're going to need to know who, how the author wants to influence that audience or the purpose. And then we're also going to talk about the rhetorical appeals and the rhetorical devices, not all of them, but some common ones. Okay, so for the speaker is basically the author, whether it's the person who is delivering a speech, whether it's the person who wrote down a message and is giving it to someone else. The speaker is the person who is delivering this message to the audience. And so whoever is talking to the audience, they are the speaker. So it's usually going to be the author if you're reading it, or it'll be the person who's actually speaking if they're giving a speech. Context. This is basically what's happening in the world. And so when someone gives someone else a message, there's usually something important happening in the world that caused this. And so it doesn't have to be the cause. It could be more like the background. It could inform the speaker. It could inspire them. But it's basically what's going on in the world when this thing happened, when this person wrote this letter, when this person gave this speech, when you talk to your friend about that thing you always wanted to talk about. What's happening in the world that helped to inform or cause this? The audience is the group of people or even person that the speaker is hoping to influence. When it comes down to it, if I'm writing a letter to one person, that one person is the audience. I'm trying to influence them. If I'm giving a speech to a graduating class, that graduating class is the audience because it is specifically tailored for them. With audience, it can't be everybody. It can't be. You have to say that at the very least, the president is talking to American citizens. You know what I mean? It can't be that someone is talking to the entire world. You should always search for that layer of nuance. Who is this person talking to? Who is this message really meant for? Sometimes you will not be told this. Sometimes you'll have to figure it out. But you need to use the context and the message specifically to make an educated guess sometimes on who the audience is. Purpose. Okay, this is specific. This is how you want to influence the group that you are talking to. So how are you going to influence the audience if you are the speaker? That is the purpose. So if I'm writing to my local congressperson and I am trying to get the congressperson to keep parks open later, whatever it might be, the purpose is to get them to do that thing. They should be influenced by the writing or the speaking that I'm doing, and they should want to change and do that. If you want to look at the president talking to America, the president could be talking to America for a multitude of reasons. It could be to help influence calm. It could be to encourage them to trust in the government. It could be encourage them to trust in each other, or to stimulate the economy and spend more money. Whatever it is, there should be a specific change in the audience when the speaker is done, and that's how you know what the purpose is. The audience went from one place to a different one. Okay, rhetorical appeals. These are the different ways that you can try and reach out to people. And so ethos, pathos, logos, we should all be familiar with those. But if I need to convince Carrie that we should go to this place for dinner instead of this other place, which one of these appeals should I use? Credibility? Should I use emotion? Should I use logic to try and convince her that we should go to one restaurant versus another? You have to know your audience. You have to know that audience in order to know which one of these will work best. And so ethos, pathos, logos, we'll talk about those on the next slide. Okay, ethos, pathos, logos. Ethos, credibility. Trust me because I'm a doctor. Trust me, I've gone to school. I have these degrees. I have these other things that prove that I'm the right person to make this decision or I am qualified to do this thing. Trust me because I am blank. Pathos, emotion. This is any emotion. So it could be anger, it could be guilt, it could be sadness. A lot of the commercials on TV play on sadness. A lot of them, political commercials right now, talk about the wrong that's happening in the world. They want to get people angry, and so they should do something because they're angry. And last but not least, logos, logic. If this thing is true, then this other thing must be true. I'm going to try and prove to you why this thing should happen because it is logical. Because if you follow this clear line of reasoning, you will end up at the same place, and you will agree with me. Okay, rhetorical devices. The rhetorical devices are the specific and unique ways that words are used to convey this specific meaning or to persuade someone. And so, for example, if you're the speaker and you have an audience in mind, and you know that pathos is going to be the best way to convince this audience of this thing that you want to convince them of, you still need to actually think of how to put the words together to make that happen. And so some specific ways you can do that to be more effective. You can use metaphors, you can use simile, you can use imagery or symbolism, and all of those things. You can diction, word choice, you can choose the specific words that are going to work better for this particular audience. And those things are called rhetorical devices. So the minute choices you make on the page or when you're speaking that help convince you or help convince the audience of something, those are your rhetorical devices. Okay, so rhetorical diagram here. I just want everybody to understand how these things fit together because not all of them, all of the terms that we just talked through are equally important. First and most important, I'll say this a couple times, is the very top of this diagram. So when we look at it and you see exigence, which once again basically just means context, audience, and purpose. Those are the things that you have to understand before you understand everything else. After that, you can begin to look at and see what type of appeals they're using, and eventually you get to the service features, those rhetorical devices we were talking about in the beginning. But you have to make sure you're looking at those things first. And so, as a reminder, first thing, you must understand that top level before you can understand why the author is making the choices that they're making in the text. In this unit, I'm going to ask you why the author chose to use a metaphor versus something else. I'm going to ask you why they used the word ragged instead of tattered. I'm going to ask you why they're making all these specific choices. And if you don't have any idea about the context of what's happening in the world, if you don't have any idea about the audience or any idea about the specific purpose and what they're trying to accomplish, you're not going to be able to answer those questions. So that top layer is most important. And once again, to highlight this, that just means that you must understand audience and purpose above everything else. So who is the audience, the specific audience, not the general one, and what purpose are they trying to accomplish by doing this? Okay, so the example we're going to talk through for today is the Martin Luther King Jr. speech, I Have a Dream. And so make sure that you should be pretty familiar with the context and things for the speech. But if not, that is the speech we're going with. So the speaker is, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. No surprises here, but you always need to know and start with who is the speaker, who's the one writing it, or who's the one actually speaking. The context, of course, is America's, terrible history, with Black Americans all the way back through slavery, all the way up until, of course, the point he was giving this speech, which would be the current civil rights movement. So you need to know the history, but you also need to know what's going on in the time right now. So that would be the context or exigence. The purpose, of course, is to unite all Americans, all backgrounds here to fight racial injustice in the United States. That's how he wants to influence his audience. He doesn't want to simply just, have a speech to get everyone excited. It is to unite them to complete this other purpose. Now, the rhetorical appeals. Are credibility, emotion, and logic here. And of course, Martin Luther King uses all of them. You will have to be able to specify where you see ethos, where you see pathos, and where you see logos throughout those speeches. So just make sure that you understand those. And then the rhetorical devices. Martin Luther King used a lot of repetition, a lot of religious diction, choosing religious words to make sure that people felt like this was a moral obligation. They shouldn't just do this because it was like a reason to do it. It was literally because like God would not approve of this, and so he used a lot of religious diction to make sure he was harping on that. Ton of imagery, ton of metaphors, but all those things you just need to understand. Okay, so reminder, you have to understand who MLK is talking to, the audience, and how he wants to influence them before you can actually explain why he used repetition and religious diction and things like that. So don't forget, you need to understand audience and purpose before you can understand anything else. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My number, once again, is 440-670-6979. You can text, you can call, email. Usually takes a little bit longer because sometimes I'm doing things like recording this lesson. Sometimes I'm doing things like grading, and sometimes I'm not by my laptop. And so text, call work really well. My office hours specifically are 1 to 2 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So please feel free to reach out. Looking forward to hearing what you think and what questions you have. So thank you so much.